All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Brown, and I'm the Assistant Director of Technology Enhanced Pedagogy with the University Teaching and Learning Commons. And we have partnered with the library to create this webinar series called Online Learning and Innovation. And this is our third in the series, so welcome. We focus on this series on different instructional technology and faculty. So we're thinking about online learning pedagogies, instructional technology tools, and our goal is to give you a lot of great information in 30 minutes. So today we are hearing from Jane Harris and Pam Howell. Am I saying your name right, Pam?
How?
How, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Southern people always want to add the L's.
I'm so sorry. They are the ITCs for the UNCG School of Health and Human Services. And before I hand over the mic, is there any questions about the series or for me before we get started? Okay, and they have asked me to start a poll, so I'll go ahead and start that poll for them. You should see a question here appear for you. I hope so. A question about your use of online discussions. So go ahead and answer that poll. There's like two more of you waiting for you to answer. Okay, again, you should see the poll there in the lower right-hand corner. Give that 10 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that poll. And Jane and Pam, you should be able to see those results. Do you see those results?
Yes, we do.
Okay. While you're looking over those results, I'm going to hand over hosting abilities to these two ladies. 1 second. All right. It's coming your way, Jane and Pam.
All right. We've got it. Welcome. Okay, it's not letting me move. Okay. All right, so we'll just have to leave it there. We're going to share a document with you that will give you a quick outline for today. And the way we're going to begin is I'm going to tell you the research on online discussions is fairly new, obviously, because online discussions have not been around that long. So I'll tell you what those are, and then we'll move on to the session. In general, and there's been a lot of research, research suggests that students who engage in online discussion have higher online course completion rates and outcomes. And in general, whether face-to-face or online, the research on collaborative learning is extremely robust. It's the strongest pedagogical research that we have. Online collaborative work can diminish the sense of distance and isolation. Research does suggest that student thinking levels in online discussion are relatively low, and instructors have understood that, and so they're not as satisfied. So research argues for both careful design of the prompt as well as for the facilitation process. And we'll talk about more of that today. And I'm going to hand it over to Pam.
So for our objectives for today, we're going to, you'll be able to describe the differences between face-to-face and online asynchronous discussions, describe challenges in moving from face-to-face discussions to asynchronous online environments, and list you'll be able to list tips for online asynchronous discussions. So, you know, we don't want this to be unbelievably formal. What would be great is if you had a question or when you have a comment, and I'm going to throw out a discussion question in a second, if you would raise your hand and then turn on your mic and ask your question. If you'd prefer, you can ask your question in the chat area. In your chat area, just please make sure that the send to is to everybody so that everybody in the class can see that. It's probably defaulted to Amy. And I also wanted to let you know that everything that we're talking about, we have a set of handouts and resources that are at the end of the document that we're showing, and you can have those forever after the session is over. So to start with, let's just talk a little bit about what differences have you noticed between face-to-face and online asynchronous, or if you haven't had much experience, what differences do you anticipate or maybe even fear? You know, there are a significant amount of differences in discussion in face-to-face where you have a lot more control up to the moment. In an online environment, it extends, you know, for a longer period of time than just a class period. And so there are a lot of different things that come into play. So does anybody have any experiences they'd like to share?
What has affected you most, affected you and your students most that you've noticed? And if you want to go ahead and enable your mic, that's fine. If you prefer to chat, please do that as well.
Hi, this is Judy Adams.
Hi, Judy.
Hi, so I've had a little bit of experience with asynchronous online, and I'll turn on my video just in case.
Great.
You want to
Yeah.
So, so in my experience, I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out which way to look.
Hi, Judy.
Hey, I remember you from the summer.
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
So I have a discussion post that I call Muddy Waters, which is where I ask students twice a semester to post a question that they have about something that they're not clear about or is confusing, and then I have each student answer somebody else's question. And what that does is really help them. I tell them that, you know, by teaching somebody else that they're actually learning the concept. And I like it. And compared to face-to-face teaching, I find it really difficult to get discussions started in face-to-face teaching because, like, when I'm in a classroom, I'll ask a question and I get mumbled answers. Nobody wants to commit to an answer. But online, when I have that, you know, that's a requirement. They have to post a question and they have to post an answer to somebody. So I think using technology that way really makes the students more accountable. So that's been my experience.
You know, the interesting thing about that, too, is that when you're in a face-to-face class, speaking up can feel very risky to do. What if you're saying something wrong? Whereas online, you know, you've got time, and so students have time. They can go look it up and make sure they're right, learn something in the process, and then post. And they think that they're helping somebody else, too. They're helping a classmate. And everybody likes, at least most people, like to help other people.
Yeah, and I think that the idea, you know, one of the first things I learned when I was participating in online discussions myself, it was really nice for me because in a classroom, I couldn't think quickly enough to respond to somebody else. And, you know, in an online environment, I just personally take time to process. And so it gives me a little bit more time to process through and think through how I actually want to respond. So it can give you a little bit more confidence. So that's great. Anybody else have any
Judith, I really like your muddy waters.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
That's
Do you mind if we borrow it and acknowledge you?
Oh, please. That might not be an original term. I can't remember now if I got it from a couple of years ago. I went to one of the summer seminars, and I think I remember somebody else using it. So don't attribute it to me, but
the assignment we will.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes. Great. Thank you. How about somebody else? The biggest change that you've noticed, something that's affected you and your students. Or something, if you're about to go online, something that concerns you.
Anybody else want to raise your hand? And
We have a quiet group today.
you're making it difficult for us to have a discussion when we're talking about discussions.
There are a couple of comments in the chat.
Oh, great. Okay.
I see. If I add this to an online class, how do I get all students to conference at the same time? Okay. Oh, hang on a minute. Thank you, Ben. Let's see. My students talk a lot about feeling isolated in the online environment, but it's also very hard to get them and keep them involved. Yes. So that's an important point, and I think that that's a complex issue, and it involves how to, well, first of all, you have to require it. They have to get credit. You don't have to grade it, but they have to get credit, and it has to be enough so that if they don't do it, that their grade suffers. Second thing is they need very careful guidelines. What exactly do you want them to put in this post? What do you want them to address? And the third thing is they need to be prepared for the discussion. That is, they need to have the prerequisite learning to do it. They need to understand your terminology. If you're talking about undergraduates often don't understand academic terminology at all. So they need to understand that. Then you need to also structure the reply. So having students do an assignment or do some sort of activity up front, post it online in the online discussion through a post first, and then give them another prompt that moves them onward, moves them forward further in asking them to respond to their classmates can really help. I don't know whether that helps you or not.
Another thing that you can do is get them into smaller groups. So they would be discussion groups instead of just the whole class. And people find that the smaller group might encourage the participation. You know, it's sort of like in a face-to-face environment when there's a larger class, it's easier to kind of be quiet. And if you're in a smaller group, even online, an online discussion, it can help a little bit.
The other, I'm looking at from the guest to everyone. If I add this to an online class, how do I get all students to conference at the same time? Do you mean synchronously, as in talking all together, online, the same way you would face-to-face? Yes, we're talking about asynchronous in this session. Synchronous is a different thing. You would use WebEx as we are using it right now. The challenge with WebEx can be that people's schedules do not align, and that can make it very challenging. But there are quite a few courses on this campus that use synchronous discussion. They're scheduled that way. So that's another option. Okay.
Yeah, try, Sonia, I've never tried small groups before. That sounds interesting. Yeah, we've had some folks that have been really successful with that, so give that a try.
Yeah, if you've got 40, 50, 60 students in a class, it's not reasonable, really, to expect students to take in, let alone you as the instructor, to be able to read and take in and respond to all those posts.
Sometimes what folks do, too, is they'll do smaller groups and then have one of the students in the group will be, and you can rotate this throughout the semester, will be in charge of synthesizing what that group came up with, and then it can go to the entire class so that it can come, out of the group into the entire class and what the group worked on, too. So that's another way to do that.
Yeah, we were going to move on to describing successes, what made you successful in some of your prompts, and identifying key challenges. But since with the poll, we have discovered that many have a little experience, we can move on and share with you some of the materials that we have created for you to look at later. If you think that would help you more to look at the materials, and you can chat along or raise your hand and audio, then we can move along and do that and show you how you can make some things work successfully, and what some of the challenges might be. So if you look in the participants pane, you'll see a hand, and if you click that hand next to your name, then we'll know, if you put your hand up, we'll know that you would like us to show you some of the materials. And if you don't put your hand up, then we know you would like to continue discussing. Ooh. Okay. Judith would like to move on. Paul would like to move on. Sonia would like to move on. Oh, we got quite a few people that would like to move on. Okay. We've got someone who says, from the guests, so I have had small groups of 5 write reflections of TED Talks and require them to respond to 2 of their peer posts. Yeah, that's a good idea. Now, here's one thing that can trip some students up. What students will tend to do, particularly undergraduate students, is they'll write an interesting reflection, but then when they go to respond to a classmate, they're going to agree or disagree on the opinion level. They're not going to bring evidence to bear. So if you want to ratchet it up a notch, what you can do is you can say, yeah, that is a problem. And that's one of the reasons why people, that's a typical thing. Here's a prompt, answer the prompt, but then reply to your classmates. Reply about what? So what you can do is you can craft that, and you can say, the easiest thing is to say, please apply evidence. Pull evidence from our readings and apply that. In other words, justify your answer with the readings from the course. Or you could come and you could say, okay, what if we had this situation, which is a little different, or an application kind of thing? How would you apply what you learned from the TED Talk to this situation? That's another way of moving things along.
It's really a significant difference between face-to-face and, in a face-to-face environment, you have the ability to jump in and guide the discussion as it moves along. In this environment, you don't really have to. So it's very important that instructors think about their prompts and how their guide, because that's the one way that you really need to guide them ahead of time, because you don't have the luxury of being right there with them. And some of the documentation that we'll share with you will help with some other suggestions as well.
Okay, what I'm going to do is, there's the link to all our materials. And that brings you to the page that we're sharing right now. And you can keep that forever. It's not going to go away. And I'm going to show you some of what we got here. There's tips for asynchronous online discussion. This is what we would call kind of basic. So, for instance, research has consistently demonstrated that the cognitive level of student posts corresponds with that of the prompt. So if you give a high-level prompt, then you're going to get a much more in-depth response. In general, I won't say that for everything, because some of it depends on the cognitive level of cognitive development level of your students. Younger undergraduates, it's going to be harder. So those are tips. I'm going to go back here. Challenges and some solutions. The lack of vocal tone, facial expression, gestures, that kind of thing. So you use emoticons, as many of you know, but you definitely avoid sarcasm. That just does not work. It's so easy to deal with, to get misunderstanding, and you know that. Students may be reluctant to post, fearing that their contributions will be inferior to those of their classmates. So if you create small discussions, that can lower the risk because it lowers the visibility. You can have them role play. Some students find it much easier to play a role because that's something separate from who they are, and it makes it less personal. Or take part in a debate. That's another thing that can work very well. When you note a particular point by a student, address the further questions to the class as a whole. Don't single out the student. So you're moving things forward, and you make it a class discussion, not a discussion with a student. So much of face-to-face discussion is between you and a student. And that's such a big adjustment online, where you really want students to talk to one another, but they don't have any experience with that unless they're mature graduate students. So you facilitate forward. You don't want to be answering everybody's post. That'll just stop things. It'll just make it crazy. But you do want to summarize at certain points and move them forward. Turn them in a different direction a little bit, but realize that facilitating a discussion online is like driving a cruise ship or a large oil tanker in comparison to the face-to-face. So that's that, and you have to make expectations really clear. Okay, so those are some challenges. Here are some strategies. There is a wonderful book out there that we have in our library in print copy. I would love to have it in e-copy, and that's it's called Going Online with Protocols, and it actually comes out of the K-12 literature. Although this book is designed for higher ed and is being, the protocols are being used in higher ed. But the protocol methodology comes out of Columbia's K-12. But take a look at these prompts. You might find them useful. They come directly from that book. We've given you a worksheet with some prompts for developing what we hope is a better online discussion. And then we've got references here, and here's the protocol book, the first one, the McDonald, the Zidney, and the Dixter. Then other books, Barkley, Brookfield, Major. all give kind of collaborative learning techniques. Now, they're mostly face-to-face, but you can make them online. And incidentally, Stephen Brookfield is coming to campus on Reading Day. He is a discussion guru, not necessarily an online discussion guru, although he has taught online. But
and he addresses it in his book.
Yes, he addresses online discussion in his latest book, and if you can get to him at all, it would be wonderful. There's a wonderful little handout that we found online called Sample Discussion Board Questions That Work, and it gives you tips, and they're annotated, and then a bad and a good example, and you might like to look at those. Lastly, if you want to look, much of the research is based on something called the Community of Inquiry Framework, and that was most of the research is based on that framework. That was a framework that was formed specifically for online discussions, and we have the book, the e-book, Garrison, and it's Thinking Collaboratively. And if you want the research, it's chapter 6, if you want to really get hardcore. So I tend to be more, what's good practice? But just for the research people, that's where it can be found. Now, Q&A, questions. What can we help you with? Yes, Sonia, if you have your hand up, please, or actually they probably had their hands up from earlier. Yeah, if you have a question, please either chat it or talk to us.
Turn on your mic, yeah, and just talk to us. Looks like we have about a minute left, so. Any more questions, comments, suggestions?
Yeah, has this helped? Yes. I would definitely break them into groups. And your question about numbers is good. If you're not doing a project, you can go as high as 8, I think, comfortably. But I don't think I'd go higher than that. If you go for a group of 4, you may find that one person kind of drops off the map, and that puts the onus on the 3 people, and that's a little less optimal, perhaps. And I'm talking just for discussion, not if you're doing projects, I would definitely not go higher than 4. But for just discussion, you can go up to 8, I think. Yeah.
And there's also, if you're not aware of, but in Canvas, when you're doing asynchronous discussions, you can set a time limit. So students have to respond to your prompt first, and then after they've done that, they can respond to each other. Is that right? They all have to respond to your prompt first.
Yes,
then,
so it's post first.
Yeah, it's post first, so that you don't have students reading other students' posts and then.
Yeah, and that actually, the post first is an excellent idea, and here's why. It levels the playing field. It allows the eager beavers to get in there first, not to have not to get ahead. So it allows the thoughtful people to have just as much of a role as others, and you as an instructor can assess evenly. So a pin discussion, all a pin discussion means is pay attention to me. It's just meant to be at the top to say.
It's a way you can organize your discussions.
Yeah. So this is the one for this week.
I want to thank Jane and Pam for so much for great discussion. You guys covered so much in 28 minutes. It's wonderful. And lots of great handouts. We're going to have the recording of this webinar on both the UTLC website and the library website. And ladies, I hope it's okay if I put the link to your documents as well so they can see that as well.
Yes, please do.
Such an action-packed 30 minutes there. Guys, we have one more session of this series, and that is going to be Google and online instruction, and that will be on December the 5th at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for coming today, and hope to see you at the next session.
Feel free to email us if you have questions.
Yeah, we love to talk about discussions. And obviously, thanks very much, everybody, for coming.
Thanks for coming.